freaking kidding me?
Hey, welcome back to the You've Got to Be Freaking Kidding Me news. I'm your host, Peter List, and today is Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. And by the way, we are now 13 days away from President Trump's re-inauguration, and he is out making some news today. Before we get to the news, though, here's a courteous reminder for you that according to usdebtclock.org, the national debt is now $36,321 billion. That means America is roughly $5 billion more in debt than it was yesterday. Now, here are a few of the news stories that caught our attention since yesterday, and we've got posted at the You've Got to Be Freaking Kidding Me News.com website. In breaking news this morning, Mark Zuckerberg, the chairman of Meta, the company that owns Facebook and Instagram, announced that his company is getting out of the censorship business. Here was Zuckerberg's announcement this morning.
Hey everyone, I want to talk about something important today because it's time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram. I started building social media to give people a voice. I gave a speech at Georgetown 5 years ago about the importance of protecting free expression, and I still believe this today. But a lot has happened over the last several years. There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political, but there's also a lot of legitimately bad stuff out there. Drugs, terrorism, child exploitation. These are things that we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that we handle responsibly. So we built a lot of complex systems to moderate content. But the problem with complex systems is they make mistakes. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms. More specifically, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US. So over the next couple of months, we're going to phase in a more comprehensive community notes system. Second, we're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse. What started as a movement to be more inclusive has increasingly been used to shut down opinions and shut out people with different ideas, and it's gone too far. So I want to make sure that people can share their beliefs and experiences on our platforms. Third, we're changing how we enforce our policies to reduce the mistakes that account for the vast majority of censorship on our platforms. We used to have filters that scanned for any policy violation. Now, we're going to focus those filters on tackling illegal and high-severity violations. And for lower severity violations, we're going to rely on someone reporting an issue before we take action. The problem is that the filters make mistakes, and they take down a lot of content that they shouldn't. So by dialing them back, we're going to dramatically reduce the amount of censorship on our platforms. We're also going to tune our content filters to require much higher confidence before taking down content. The reality is that this is a trade-off. It means we're going to catch less bad stuff, but we'll also reduce the number of innocent people's posts and accounts that we accidentally take down. Fourth, we're bringing back civic content. For a while, the community asked to see less politics because it was making people stressed. So we stopped recommending these posts. But it feels like we're in a new era now, and we're starting to get feedback that people want to see this content again. So we're going to start phasing this back into Facebook, Instagram, and Threads while working to keep the communities friendly and positive. Fifth, we're going to move our trust and safety and content moderation teams out of California, and our US-based content review is going to be based in Texas. As we work to promote free expression, I think that it will help us build trust to do this work in places where there is less concern about the bias of our teams. Finally, we're going to work with President Trump to push back on governments around the world that are going after American companies and pushing to censor more. The US has the strongest constitutional protections for free expression in the world. Europe has an ever-increasing number of laws institutionalizing censorship and making it difficult to build anything innovative there. Latin American countries have secret courts that can order companies to quietly take things down. China has censored our apps from even working in the country. The only way that we can push back on this global trend is with the support of the US government. And that's why it's been so difficult over the past 4 years when even the US government has pushed for censorship. By going after us and other American companies, it has emboldened other governments to go even further. But now we have the opportunity to restore free expression, and I am excited to take it. It'll take time to get this right, and these are complex systems. They're never going to be perfect. There's also a lot of illegal stuff that we still need to work very hard to remove. But the bottom line is that after years of having our content moderation work focus primarily on removing content, it is time to focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our systems, and getting back to our roots about giving people voice. I'm looking forward to this next chapter. Stay good out there, and more to come soon.
There is a lot to unpack in that statement. However, when Zuckerberg was announcing the changes, he also alluded to the fact that the Biden-Harris administration was pushing censorship on the social media companies. And whether people are for censorship or against it, I think everyone on the right and the left knew about it. But to hear him allude to it, it's something fairly new. In looking at the changes, Semaphore put some context around the move. Last week, for example, Semaphore wrote, Meta is revamping its global policy team with President Nick Clegg stepping down and being replaced by Joel Kaplan, his deputy and the company's most prominent Republican. Kaplan, who was the White House Deputy Chief of Staff under George W. Bush, has been one of the most forceful voices inside Meta against restrictions on political speech, arguing internally that such policies would disproportionately mute conservative voices. Then today, on the heels of the Zuckerberg announcement, Semaphore's Liz Hoffman notes that the company also added Trump advisor and cage fighting executive Dana White to its board. That happened yesterday, and some people noted it is odd to see him with Zuckerberg. However, there is some reasons behind that. Meta, according to Semaphore's Hoffman, is early and theatrical in its rightward turn as Republicans take over Washington, but it won't be alone. And while companies may face criticism for MAGA shifts, the business case is probably stronger than it was for the equally theatrical progressive shift these companies made in the late 2010s. Now, Trump is poised to give companies things they want, like less regulation and visas for high-skilled workers, and the broader mood has shifted. We've all seen the war within MAGA, so to speak, about the H-1B visas. That is an issue, but that may not be the big issue, which I'll get to in a second. Back to Semaphore. Occam's razor offers another theory. Mark Zuckerberg remade his board once, switching out Ken Chenault, Erskine Bowles, and a few other blue-chip graybeards he sparred with. White and Zuck are friends from the latter's martial arts days. Boards are less clubby than they used to be, and Zuck's controlling stock means he needs fewer friendly directors than most CEOs. But all things being equal, executives would rather have supportive voices in the boardroom than nags. Meta's board now includes two close allies of Trump in White and Mark Andreessen, at least 6 billionaires, and its lead independent director, on paper the biggest check on Zuck's power, is 77-year-old Treasury official Robert Kimmitt. Now, I'm going to offer another theory. Speaking of Mark Andreessen is one of the tech billionaires who's behind some of Silicon Valley's most prominent companies. And in addition to being on the Meta board, like Elon Musk and others, he is a former liberal who backed Trump in 2024. So following Trump's defeat of Harris back in November, Andreessen appeared both on the Joe Rogan podcast and Barry Weiss's podcast. In both, he revealed a couple things. First, he revealed his disdain for what he called the soft totalitarianism of the Biden-Harris administration. And what he meant by soft totalitarianism is the censorship and the cancel culture that had become prevalent under Biden-Harris. And he saw it not only continuing, but getting worse if Harris was elected. The second thing that he revealed was that the Biden-Harris administration had been planning on controlling artificial intelligence. Here's what he said on the Barry Weiss podcast.
We had meetings in D.C. in May where we talked to them about this, and the meetings were absolutely horrifying, and we came out basically deciding we had to endorse Trump.
What did you hear in those meetings?
AI is a technology basically that the government is going to completely control. This is not going to be a startup thing. They actually said flat out to us, don't do AI startups. Like don't fund AI startups. That's not something that we're going to allow to happen. They're not going to be allowed to exist. There's no point. They basically said AI is going to be a game of 2 or 3 big companies working closely with the government, and we're going to basically wrap them in a, I'm paraphrasing, but we're going to basically wrap them in a government cocoon. We're going to protect them from competition. We're going to control them, and we're going to dictate what they do. And then I said, I don't understand how you're going to lock this down so much, because like the math for, AI is like out there and it's being taught everywhere. And, they literally said, during the Cold War, we classified entire areas of physics and took them out of the research community, and like entire branches of physics basically went dark and didn't proceed. And that if we decide we need to, we're going to do the same thing to the math underneath AI.
Wow.
And I said, I've just learned 2 very important things. Because I wasn't aware of the former, and I wasn't aware that you were, even conceiving of doing it to the latter.
So in that context, let's go back to Meta for a moment. Given that A, Andreessen sits on the board of Meta, B, he's also stated that he is currently spending about half of his time down in Mar-a-Lago, and C, there's an AI arms race, if you will, and having spent billions in AI, Meta is one of the big players. The announcement from Zuckerberg today is not all that surprising. So moving on to some other news, I mentioned at the beginning that President-elect Trump was out making headlines earlier today. Well, during a press conference, the president warned Hamas that they had better release the hostages that they've been holding for more than 450 days before he took office on January 20th, or there would be, quote, hell to pay. Take a listen. And by the way, the first voice you hear is Trump's Middle Eastern envoy, Steve Witkoff.
I don't know anyone who delegates better than President Trump. He gives us a lot of authority to speak on his behalf, and he exhorts us to speak emphatically. And emphatically means you better get it, you better do this, because the alternative...
Do you think they're waiting for President Trump to take office?
No, I think they heard him loud and clear. Better get done by the inaugural.
But when you say all hell before I take office, all hell must be paid if you don't release the hostages.
Well, do I have to define it for you? Look, all hell will break out. If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East. And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is. And they should have given them back a long time. They should have never taken them. There should have never been the attack of October 7th. People forget that. But there was, and many people are killed. They're no longer hostages. I have people from Israel and others calling, begging me to get, we had also people there from the United States, just so you know. They're holding some so-called hostages from the U.S. But I've had mothers come to me and fathers crying, can I get the body of their son back? Can I get the body of their daughter back?
Now, there were a couple of other clips of President Trump's news conference that are going viral this afternoon. One of them is where the president is saying that he wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And I'm not playing that clip for you because, frankly, I'm not sure whether he's being serious or whether he's trolling the media.
You are listening to You've Got to Be Freaking Kidding Me News.
You've got to be freaking kidding me.
Just a few more stories to cover real quickly before we wrap up today. In other news, the Associated Press reported late yesterday that federal prosecutors in New York announced 2 pharmaceutical companies based in India were being charged on Monday with smuggling chemicals used in the production of the deadly drug fentanyl. Roxuter Chemicals and Athos Chemicals were charged in separate indictments with criminal conspiracy to distribute and import chemicals into the U.S., Mexico, and elsewhere, knowing they would be used to manufacture the synthetic opioid, according to U.S. District Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. On the crime front, a Virginia nurse was charged with child abuse after NICU babies were found with unexplained injuries. This is a horrible story. According to Buffalo's ABC News 7, police in Central Virginia arrested a NICU nurse at the Henrico Doctors Hospital, charging the woman with felony counts of malicious wounding and child abuse after several babies were found to have unexplained injuries. This comes 1 week after the hospital announced that it was temporarily stopping admissions to the neonatal intensive care unit after 3 babies were found to have unexplained fractures in late November and December. Aaron Strotman was taken into custody Thursday and booked at Enrico Jail West early Friday morning. In other crime news, a Key West man has been accused of placing tracking devices on 2 people's cars. According to the Miami Herald, a Key West man is accused of placing Apple AirTags on 2 people's cars to illegally track them, according to police. Key West detectives' investigation dates to November 8th when 2 people went to police after receiving cell phone notifications alerting them that an unrecognized AirTag was detected near them and tracking their location. Apple introduced the AirTag in 2021 to help people track their belongings, but the Miami Herald is explaining that criminals soon began using the small devices to illegally stalk victims. Since then, Apple updated its security measures so a person's iPhone would alert them if an unknown AirTag was tracking them. Now, there are a few other stories that I'm going to combine to kind of wrap up today's episode. As of last July, an overwhelming majority of Americans said that the southern border is either in a state of crisis or a major problem, according to a Gallup poll. This is in large part why President Trump was elected again. Well, here are a couple of stories that we have posted on the You've Got to Be Friggin' Kidding Me news website that you should check out. Headline yesterday from the New York Post. First migrant caravan of 2025 marches from Mexico to U.S. to try to beat Trump inauguration. The first migrant caravan of 2025 is marching from Mexico toward the U.S. with its 2,000 members hoping to rush the border before President-elect Donald Trump takes office. More massive groups are also expected to make haste before the January 20th inauguration of Trump, who has vowed to launch a sweeping immigration crackdown. Here's a related story from down in Texas earlier today, as reported by Fox News. 4 confirmed members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua have been caught trying to sneak illegally into the U.S. via the southern border, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has announced. The 4 TDA members were among 22 suspected illegal migrants who were apprehended on New Year's Eve by the Texas Department of Public Safety working in Val Verde County. Now, I'm going to swing this to Washington and what happened today. Headline from Blaze Media: Democrats overwhelmingly vote against Laken-Riley Act. The House passed the Laken-Riley Act on Tuesday with a majority of Democrats voting against the bill. The Laken-Riley Act is the first bill in the 119th Congress addressing illegal immigration, requiring that aliens charged with theft or burglary be detained. The landmark legislation was named after Laken-Riley, a 22-year-old nursing student who was brutally murdered by an illegal alien while she was jogging at the University of Georgia. Despite the overwhelming resistance by 159 Democrats, 48 voted with 216 Republicans to pass the legislation. So you've got 159 Democrats voting against a bill that would detain criminals who are in the country illegally. Go figure. Well, that wraps up the You've Got to Be Freaking Kidding Me news for Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. Links, by the way, to the stories we've shared today, as well as others, will be under the audio portion of today's episode. Until tomorrow, don't forget to visit You've Got to Be Freaking Kidding Me News.com. That is YGTBFKM News.com. And subscribe to our Substack so you can get this directly in your email, or visit us on Rumble, Spotify, Truth Social, YouTube, or wherever you get your news, and subscribe there.
They spend more than we make, leave us in debt, all they do is take. You've got to be freaking kidding me. Low information voters watching cable news, watching CNN, your morning Joe. I've got no use for you. You got to be freaking kidding me. They tell you don't eat meat while fentanyl floods the streets. They censor your speech while the media tells you what to think. You've got to be freaking kidding me. Don't be a fool, you useless tool.